Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show, Week 13 Waiver Wire Edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to break down everything you, a scholar, needs to do to get those fantasy lineups right ahead of Week 13. So just 2 more short weeks between us and those fantasy football playoffs. I know we got family and friends in Turkey to worry about, but at least for the next couple of days, let's just worry about getting those fantasy lineups right so we can make fun of those very same friends and families by asserting our dominance in a weird thing that we like to call fantasy football. So to help us do that, we do have the one, the only Kendall Valenzuela in the house. What's up, K-Dog?
What's up, Ian? Yeah, this is the time that you can be at the family dinner table and be like, "Yeah, my fantasy team. You want to check it out? It looks pretty good here. So yeah, we're ready. No teams on a bye this week. It should be a good one. Ready to go."
This is the fun time where family members that I've talked to maybe, once or twice a year, like, oh, yeah, you said this one thing, 6 months ago. Do you remember being wrong on that, Ian? And I was like, oh, well, it is so great to see you, Uncle, as well. So all Drake and joshing around aside, we actually do have a pretty good deal for you guys. If you are trying to get better at fantasy football for longer, just the next couple of weeks, you can get 40% off Fantasy Life Plus this Black Friday window. That's 40% off for 12 full months of fantasy football domination. This covers the rest of the year, all of next year's draft season, and most of next season's in-season coverage. Again, you can use code BF40 to claim 40% off. You can use our link in our description. And again, this deal is going to end on November 30th, so get in while it lasts. Again, that's code BF40 to claim 40% off a Fantasy Life Plus premium subscription. With that in mind, though, let's get into the Waiver Wire show, everyone. It's time for our DraftKings opening lines. We had 11 on 11 car crashes going on all day on Sunday. So, of course, there's plenty of injury and news to catch up on. So, starting things off with the quarterback position, some good news, Kendall. It does seem like Joe Burrow is going to be back under center ahead of the Bengals' Thanksgiving evening matchup against the Ravens. Always a sleepy one to try to get through that, after eating our freaking hearts out all day. But hopefully it will be Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. I say hopefully because, again, basically we're working off of Bengals head coach Zach Taylor saying that he anticipates Burrow playing, but also Burrow took it to Instagram, posted an old Instagram photo of himself wearing a LeBron jersey saying he's back. So it does seem like Burrow is back. Unfortunately, no T. Higgins or Trey Hendrickson for this matchup. So I'm just happy, Kendall, because again, it was a situation where the Bengals just they've won one of their last, 7 or 8 games. So it's been very, very tough times for them. And Joe Burrow, I wouldn't have blamed the organization for holding him out without too much to play for. Sounds like that won't be the case, though.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. I mean, if you pick Joe Burrow, I remember talking to Dwayne McFarland a couple weeks ago on SiriusXM. He had one team where he decided to pick up Joe Burrow, and it was a team that was pretty dominant, except at the quarterback position. So if you've been waiting on Joe Burrow or someone that you picked up a couple weeks ago just with the hopes that he was going to return, you get it this week. Where are you going to have him, Ian, in your early rankings? I know those are going to come out soon. Like, is he a top 10, top 8, top 5 play for you?
I got him at QB9, so I'm giving guys like Matthew Stafford, Dak Prescott, and Justin Herbert the benefit of the doubt ahead of, the big 5 dual threat aliens at the top. But I got Burrow ahead of Jacoby Brissett, Brock Purdy, Bo Nix, and Jackson Dart. So it'd be a lot cooler if T. Higgins was there. I do want to exercise a little bit of caution because we did see him playing through that calf injury early on in 2023. Really was a shell of himself, both in terms of his real life production and the fantasy numbers. So don't get too carried away just yet. But it also is Joe Burrow. We got Jamar Chase returning to the lineup, and it is a Ravens defense that while they are improving, hey, we've even seen better versions, struggle to slow down Mr. Joe Burr. So good stuff going on in Cincy. Not quite as good news elsewhere, though. We do have Buccaneers quarterback Baker Mayfield believed to have suffered a sprained AC joint in his left shoulder. He's getting an MRI done today. Hopefully we get live, news coverage here on the matter by the time this show is over. No fracture, no structural damage is believed. They are not ruling him out ahead of Sunday's matchup against the Cardinals. Obviously, though, Kendall will be a downgrade for Emeka Ibuka, Chris Godwin, Tez Johnson, all parties involved if we do have Teddy Bridgewater under center.
Yeah, sorry, no offense to Teddy Bridgewater, but it's just something where you downgrade the whole offense. We were kind of on the side of being cautious too with Chris Godwin. If you were looking at starting him, we said, just be careful, maybe wait a week here. Emeka Ibuka, though, Ian, for the past couple of games, except after that week 9 bye, he had 23 fantasy points in week 10, but since then, week 11, week 12, 9 fantasy points, 6.2. It's come down. He only had 3 receptions, 32 yards. That game was kind of out of their control pretty early going up against that dominant Rams team, but you're hoping that they can catch a spark. But if it's with anyone other than Baker Mayfield, you're kind of looking and hoping that things get a little bit better. They play Atlanta week 15 and then week 16 at Carolina at Miami. So that's not a bad playoff schedule at all for the fantasy playoffs. But if it's not with Baker Mayfield, who again has been kind of a downgrade anyway for us, you just hope that they can catch a little bit of heat going down the line. But not 6.2 fantasy points, 9 fantasy points for Ibuka is not what you want to see after the really good start he had to the season.
Averaging under 10 PPR points per game since week 6. That's only good for wide receiver 42 status. His own teammate, Tez Johnson, actually has outscored him during that stretch. So a little bit wonky. We had him miss about half a game with the hamstring injury. Who knows exactly how healthy he was coming back. I still maintain Ibuka is a very good football player. Unfortunately, though, again, we're starting to grow that sample size, Kendall, where we can only kind of talk through, the duds for so long until we have to start kind of reassessing things. So we'll see what happens with Baker. Meanwhile, in Washington, Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels is unlikely to play Sunday per head coach Dan Quinn. He is expected to return to practice, though, so it does sound like a week 14 or 15 return actually is in the realm of possibility. Also note that Shedeur Sanders was named starting quarterback despite Dylan Gabriel clearing the concussion protocol. Best of luck to Sanders and the Browns ahead of their matchup against the 49ers. We also have Texans quarterback CJ Stroud still in the concussion protocol. He will start when he's ready, so I do not think it's a soft benching, if you will. However, many people do have that question in their mind because Vikings quarterback JJ McCarthy is also now in the concussion protocol. I'm not one of them. He did take a hard hit. And I do think that, just Kendall, we've seen teams get fined draft picks and stuff like that before. Could you imagine like how many draft picks and dollars the Vikings would lose if they were making up a concussion and this ridiculous ankle sprain like for JJ McCarthy? I know he's been horrible and I'm not trying to say anything about that, but just the guy's dealing with the concussion. Okay. Let's chill on the soft benching stuff.
Yeah, although he has been playing so poorly in that we wouldn't be like, yeah, no, that makes sense. A little bit of a soft benching, but I agree with you. Like, don't freak out. It's just one of those things where they have to do anything else, Ian. Who is startable in this offense? Realistically, Justin Jefferson, I understand because of where you took him in the first round. You just look around and you say, I don't have better options. He gives you the high ceiling because it's J Jeff, but even him, like 8.8 points, 4 of 6 targets, 48 yards. Since week 9, when we saw JJ McCarthy return, he's averaging 11.1 points per game. So if you just cover up the name, that's someone that we would say, yeah, maybe you have to look somewhere else. So I get it. With him, you start him. With Aaron Jones, probably to a certain extent, you start him as well, just because of the lack of running back depth that you might have, especially in those deeper formats, 14-team, 16-team leagues. There's nowhere else for you to go. JJ McCarthy's been bad, and that's not even a hot take. Like, that's not even an overreaction, Ian. So yeah, he's in the concussion protocol. They're going to turn somewhere else this week. But if we see a spark with anyone else again, like, you're just going to have to wonder what they do the rest of the season.
Now, if JJ's in the concussion protocol, does that mean 9 is as well, or how does that work? But okay, I'll stop. But Justin Jefferson is just my wide receiver 18 on the week. Wide receiver 18 for one of the best wide receivers in the game. It is crazy. Honestly, could have been even a little bit lower if some of those guys in that same, just range of wide receivers had a little bit easier matchups. Otherwise, guys, in the running back streets, we do have a relatively good update from Pete Carroll. Ashton Genty's ankle injury is not believed to be severe. It will be Raheem Mostert. Otherwise, we'll talk about it in a little bit. But I will say it's been such a grind for Genty, who actually has a top 5 rate in terms of forcing missed tackles per touch this season. Like, he's been making the most out of his opportunities. That said, if he's out of the picture, I have a hard time believing Raheem Mostert's going to be commanding that same sort of 3-down workhorse role. I would expect to see Zamir White and Dylan Laub in an offense that, just fired their OC. So also not a hot take to say they have been quite horrific this year. Also note that Todd Bowles said Bucky Irving will be practicing all week, and if he is fine on Friday, he will suit up this Sunday against the Cardinals. Also note that Chris Godwin's usage should be ramping up as well. Only ran around 42% of the Buccaneers dropbacks there on Sunday night. Also in wide receiver land, Terry McLaurin participated in practice on Monday ahead of his Thanksgiving Day matchup. Also note Rams wide receiver Tutu Atwell is getting his practice window opened up as well. The Commanders play on Thanksgiving. That might they play on Sunday. Sorry. The teams on Thanksgiving are practicing, but because the Commanders had the bye, he also is out there on Monday. So we won't get an official designation, but hopefully the artist known as Scary Terry ready to return before too long. At tight end, Darren Waller is getting his practice window open. And this one's actually interesting, Kendall, because with Darren Waller, obviously was balling out, coming basically out of retirement, and had his usage ramped up for the Dolphins and was emerging as a big-time threat in the red zone and looked good out there. Had a pec injury, which isn't good. We don't want to see our guys hurt, but it's not like he hurt his knee or, we have reason to believe he's going to be losing a bunch of his athleticism. So I'm not sure if he's going to be back this week or if it's a few weeks or maybe not at all, but it's good news, and especially when you look at the schedule, Kendall. Dolphins, next 5 games, Saints, Jets, Steelers, Bengals, and the Buccaneers. I'm just saying, if we see one good game, if Darren Waller returns this Sunday, has his usual full-time role and scores a touchdown, he's going to be right back in the top 10 ahead of a real nice stretch to end the season.
No, for sure. I wrote about him for the last couple of weeks in deeper formats. Like if you're in 10-team, 12-team leagues, you don't need to go as far as like saving Darren Waller on your bench. But if you're looking to the fantasy playoffs, like I've got Sam Laporta and I'm hurting at the tight end position here. And so going forward, like you said, you mentioned their fantasy playoff schedule. But if anyone's like if we're looking at a team that has a really nice schedule facing the Steelers, facing the Bengals, and facing the Buccaneers, like you look at that schedule and you say to yourself, okay, I could tell myself a story where Tua Tagovailoa doesn't look really awful. And since week 8, Tua ranks 5th in the NFL in EPA per play, 14th in CPOE. So it's not like Tua Tagovailoa is someone that we say start him every single week. You got to love him. He's not there yet, but he is someone that if you're looking for a quarterback, if you're hurting at quarterback, we're going to talk about some guys here for waivers, but he has a good shot to score multiple touchdowns. Now, this weekend, we don't know if he's going to be back. Like you said, they're playing the New Orleans Saints this weekend, but yeah, he's going to be someone that I recommend on the waiver wire. And therefore you look at Darren Waller ahead and you say, okay, well, if you need a little bit of depth at tight end, he's not a bad pickup.
And I get it, guys. I would like to think you have a better QB option than Tua down the stretch, but we're in super flex leagues. It's 2025, okay? And if you're anything like me, you probably have a few. We've been dealing with some injuries, so maybe Tua is going to be someone that you actually are looking at for one of those spots. Otherwise, guys, some bad news for the Patriots offensive line. Left tackle Will Campbell suffered an MCL sprain. He is a candidate for IR, albeit not believed to be of the season-ending variety. They also lost their guard Jared Wilson to a high ankle sprain. He is considered week to week. This is a new one, though, Kendall. Chiefs guard Trey Smith suffered both a high and a low ankle sprain. So apparently he avoided the mid ankle sprain, but he is expecting to miss time. So get better soon. Trey Smith, but yeah, high and low at the same time. Didn't quite know that was a thing. Also know Eagle safety Andrew Mukaba fractured his ankle that will require surgery. Could be season ending. Stay tuned there. The Raiders named quarterback coach, not commentator, quarterback coach Greg Olson, their interim OC, after firing Chip Kelly. And then also the Giants got on that train as well. Fired defensive coordinator Shane Bowen, which honestly, just based on how they've been blowing these, one big lead after another with so many resources on that defensive line. Tough to say that we, didn't see that one coming. But hey, guys, let's get into some waiver wire goodness. This has been our DraftKings opening lines. But first, a quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. I've teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook to bring you the ultimate way to tip off this NBA season. Right now, new customers who bet just $5 will get $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins, plus 3 months of NBA League Pass on us. That's right, new customers bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins, plus 3 months of NBA League Pass on DraftKings. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using the promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. You can stay in on the action and use your bonus bets on same-game parlays, player props, money lines, spreads, and more. And if you love to throw live betting, well, that's great because DraftKings has you covered with live odds and prop bets every single night. So here's your play. New customers bet $5 and get 3 months of NBA League Pass on us, plus get $200 if your bet wins, paid out in bonus bets. Thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook for sponsoring this. Let's make this NBA season one to remember. Note that minimum minus 500 odds are required, and this subscription will auto-renew. It's time for our big 4 running back waiver wire editions of the week presented by the fine folks over at Pristine Auction. Kendall, first 2 going to lump together because they probably aren't available in your league, pal. But that said, if they are, you should be running, not walking to pick them up. Bears running back Kyle Monangai and Steelers running back Kenneth Gainwell, 2 players, Kendall, that I like to kind of put in that flex whip benefits tier, okay? Because no, we're not going to just be putting them in as our RB2 and saying, oh, I'm thrilled about this. But hey, we're looking at 10 to 15 touches. Both of them, found the end zone this last game. Like, they are good players. But the bigger thing is, God forbid something happens to DeAndre Swift or Jalen Warren, who, by the way, guys, are both actively on the injury report as it is. If something goes down there, all of a sudden, man, we're not going to need more than probably 2 or 3 hands to rank the number of running backs we want to start over Monangai or Gainwell during any given week.
Yeah, I love Kyle Monangai. I love the shout out. Feels like, Ian, we've been talking about him in and out on this show and in waivers for like the past couple of months here. But you said it. I mean, DeAndre Swift's been in and out off and on the injury report. He was limited on Wednesday for the second straight week due to that hip injury. He practiced in full the rest of the week, and obviously we saw him in week 12. But in this game, you saw Kyle Monangai play a little bit more on both early downs and at the goal line. Swift was obviously the same receiving back that we've seen. But at any given moment, you're looking at 10 10.8, 10.7 fantasy points over the last 2 weeks from Kyle Monangai, which, like you said, Ian, when we say flex territory, that's what we're looking at. We're not expecting 20 plus fantasy points from our guys in the flex, but you're going to take 10 week in and week out. This is a week where we don't have any teams on a bye, and then we have another 4 teams on a bye going into week 14. So that's something that you do want to prepare for, and that is also going to be Ramondre Stevenson, Travion Henderson as well. So he is definitely someone that you can pick up, and like I said, you like 10 fantasy points from anyone. Kenneth Gainwell as well, 44% available. I think the last time I looked, like, he's not available to everyone. I know, Ian, you get those comments. I get those comments where it's like, what is this, an 18 league? Like, we're trying to help everyone here, people. So Kenneth Gainwell is still someone that should, I think, be rostered in more leagues, to be totally honest with you. We saw what happens when Jaylen Warren goes down. He takes over that backfield. So you're looking at someone who, like, in PPR leagues, like, I'm ranking him as an RB3 going into this weekend.
100%. And that's the main point here, like 44% and 46% available for Monangai and Gainwell, respectively. That's just too low, okay? So double check those waiver wires because, again, these are guys who absolutely should be on those fantasy benches as we get into the ever-important playoff season. Now, someone who's available in 97% of leagues, so a little bit of a change of pace. Saints RB2, maybe turned RB1, Devin Neal. Unfortunately, Alvin Kamara is dealing with an MCL sprain per Dr. Jeff Mueller, who's a great follow on Twitter at JMThrivePT. He says the plan for him is probably going to be missing at least 2 to 3 weeks. And again, I've seen other learned doctors say that it does seem like a multi-week absence is firmly on the table. So this is kind of what we were talking about, when we were hyping up, just the possibility for Kamara to get traded in the first place, Kendall. Obviously, Kendre Miller suffered his own season-ending injury, so that didn't quite work out. But in addition to the trade possibilities for Kamara, it was always like, well, what if he suffers an injury that maybe isn't even super severe, but just is enough of a nag where it's like, hey, what are we even playing for in December? Maybe we just let Kamara get healthy. So it should be Devin Neal leading the way. That's what happened when we saw, Kamara leave the picture during Sunday afternoon. That said, Audric Estime was not active for that game, and I freaking hate this, Kendall, but it's the world we're living in right now. Taysom Hill actually had more rush attempts than Devin Neal. So not the world's best offense, but that said, it's a guy who plays 70% of the snaps, and he's on pretty much every single waiver wire out there. So yeah, we can get behind a little bit of Devin Neal.
Yeah, for sure. This is why we've been talking about Kendre Miller all season. We've been talking about Devin Neal since he went on IR. It's because of a moment like this where you look at Alvin Kamara, you say, okay, he's down with an injury. And this was someone that we already talked about, Ian, as a potential player that might get shut down closer to the end of the season just because they know that they're not winning many games. They don't have much to play for. So you look to Devin Neal, he scored 11.1 fantasy points in this kind of relief outing. But he did a lot of damage, 5 receptions, 43 yards. So you look at him through the air. Of course, Taysom Hill is always going to be like the gnat, Ian, that never goes away. Like, he's always buzzing around. You're always going to hear him, and you say, okay, you got Taysom Hill out there for more volume. So I do want to watch what they do with Audric Estime because, like you said, he wasn't active. You plan on him being active for next week, but you don't usually get a running back that you can say could have the crack at lead back duties. So you look at this and say, Devin Neal, for what it's worth, if he really does get a shot at getting that heavy volume, that heavy workload, there's not usually a guy going into week 13 that we can say pick him up because he gets that workload. So if you have a chance to scoop him up, you put him on your bench, whatever, flex him if you need to in desperate times. But we don't usually get this. And I think that Alvin Kamara could be sidelined for more than 1 week. So if we see that, then you're going to be able to use him for more than just week 13.
And it would be the most fantasy football thing ever if Devin Neal actually gets the sort of target share that we were begging the Saints to give Alvin Kamara all season long, because that does seem like it's going to be the path to success here. Obviously, we got Chris Olave and Jawan Johnson doing their thing, but Saints remain a not very good football team. They're going to have to be throwing the football a lot. And Tyler Shuck seems capable of keeping guys involved, at least in the full PPR, sort of capacity, and keeping them fantasy relevant. So again, am I just way too early, week 13 rankings? With Kamara in there, I only had him as my RB, 27 or 28, I should say. That's alongside guys like Aaron Jones, Kamani Vidal, assuming Omarion Hampton isn't back yet, Kenneth Gainwell, Trey Benson, Kyle Monangai. So again, it's kind of with those other running backs in bad offenses and or RB2s and better options. I don't think I'd necessarily be ranking Devin Neal quite there because I am concerned that we just see a 50-50 split with Audric Estime and then Taysom freaking Hill leading the way. But I do think something in that RB3 range with guys like, Chris Rodriguez, Zach Charbonnet, Dave Montgomery probably would make a little bit more sense for Devin Neal. It's worth finding out, though, Kendall, because again, we tried to do our best with this, but let's face it, we're trying to predict a future that uses a ball that's not even round, okay? Things are going to go crazy. We're going to be right about something, and then it's going to go reverse course. Tyron Tracy, all right? We were saying pick him up. didn't go great for a week, and now things are looking quite a bit better. So the big thing I will say with Devin Neal is if you can scoop him up, and let's say he does get a workhorse role, man, he really could benefit because these next 5 weeks, Dolphins, Buccaneers, Panthers, Jets, and Titans, none of them rank better than 21st in terms of PPR points per game allowed to opposing running backs. So that truly is, Kendall, one of the best schedules we can ask for at the running back position.
Yeah, and like you said, if it doesn't work out, you cut him. We're going into week 13. We know a lot of people don't have money left if you have to spend fab on him. Like, we know you're at the bottom of the barrel. But like we said, you don't usually get to this point in the season where someone could have the opportunity to be a lead back and have that kind of role. So if you pick him up and it doesn't work out, fine, we cut him the next week. Like, he could be one of your first cuts. But I would say hang on to him, even if we don't see it for week 13, and be a little bit patient, because like you said, Ian, it would be the funniest thing ever if he got, some of that pass catching work that we hoped and prayed that Alvin Kamara was going to get, and they give it to him. Like, that would just be, like you said, the most fantasy football thing ever. So I would say just stay a little patient after week 14. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
In terms of fab, I mean, remember, we don't get a chance to roll it over season to season, so you're going to have to use it eventually. Even if I was, just very lucky, I still have 90 out of $100 or something. I don't think it's necessarily one where I'd be, just trying to make sure no matter what I get the guy. I will say, though, guys, it's pretty easy. Go look at your league standings, see who has Alvin Kamara, see whatever their fab is. And if you want Devin Neal, bid $1 more than they have. You'll get them. You'll be guaranteed to get them at least over that guy. And it'll be a funny moment for you to be able to make fun of them in the group chat. All you can ask for in fantasy football land. So good stuff on Devin Neal. Another player, though, honestly has a role that we should already be feeling pretty good about, just coming off a bye week. That is Commanders running back Chris Rodriguez, still available in 84% of leagues. So obviously people had a lot of holes to fill last week. I understand why he is a little bit more available than maybe expected. But man, Kendall, this really was a breakout-esque situation in week 11 before the bye. Honestly, was looking that way in week 10, but Rodriguez suffered that shoulder injury that kicked him out of that game early. But unfortunately, training camp Hall of Famer Bill Krosky-Merritt no longer the lead dog in Washington.
Not Jacory Krosky-Merritt, Ian, taking strays already. Like, the training camp darling, that's what we like to call him. It's just, he hasn't lived up to expectations. Everyone can see that if you're starting him week in and week out. It just sucks. He was rising up draft boards, but in week 11, I mean, you look at Chris Rodriguez and he led this Commanders backfield because, again, they're coming off their bye. So week 11, he had 15 carries, 79 rushing yards. And so I don't usually recommend running backs too that are facing the Denver Broncos. Like, if you do go and pick him up, you might want to just look, see who else is out there, because the Denver Broncos are a tough team. Again, another team coming off their bye. But he is someone that just should be more rostered, if we're going to be totally honest with you. I think Chris Rodriguez down the stretch, again, playing the Denver Broncos this weekend, so that's not nice, even though they're at home. But they do finish out the season against the Giants and the Cowboys. So if you're really looking for someone, if you're a little bit light at running back depth, then he is someone that I have just been recommending over the past couple of weeks. They do face the Eagles week 16, so not necessarily the easiest when we're talking about the Giants and Commanders, or the Giants and Cowboys. But yeah, I just think that he is going to, and he's looked better than Jacory Krosky-Merritt, so you might as well go get the better running back over there.
And the Cowboys' run D has been playing better. We've seen that over the last 2 weeks, adding Quinnen Williams, getting the Marvin Overshown back and everything. But still, all right, I think they've gone from being absolutely horrendous to probably just being, an average sort of group. I don't think there's someone we need to all of a sudden fear when we're actually selecting guys. And to Chris Rodriguez's credit, man, I mean, it's not just a volume-based play. Yes, the season-high 16 touches we got before the bye were great. But earlier, Kendall, I just had a chart, success rate and then explosive play rates, trying to see what running backs, are consistently getting to 2 to 3 yards when you need 2 to 3 yards, the Kareem Hunt special, if you will, versus running backs are really explosive, but maybe get, stuffed a bit more than we like. Devon Achane emerges more so in that. When you look in the top right corner, though, it actually shows you the running backs are doing a really good job with both. And I'm not kidding, man. You see Chris Rodriguez up there with Rico Dowdle, Jahmyr Gibbs, J.K. Dobbins, Breece Hall, James Cook, and Jonathan Taylor. So maybe it's just because Chris Rodriguez, he's been around for a few years. He's not a rookie we've been obsessing about since April. Obviously has a pretty bland name. He doesn't have a cool nickname like Bill. But Chris Rodriguez, again, someone who I'm not saying he's going to be a quote-unquote league winner, but you got a couple flex spots to fill. You could do worse than a running back looking at 15 to 20 touches on the afternoon. So again, I think the fact that he's already available this much and there hasn't been like a big change in news for Washington since the bye, I don't think you're going to have to be spending a lot of, fab to get him. And honestly, if you guys listen to us live right now, I think in a lot of leagues, because they've had the bye, you might even be able to pick them up during Monday Night Football. So if you had someone get injured, go ahead and cut them right now, or you just have an underperforming player anyway, cut them now. you might be able to pick up Chris Rodriguez for free. How about them apples, Kendall? That'd be pretty sweet.
That would be sick. And that's why you always want to look at the waiver wire. Like you've said it before, Ian, but just look at who people are dropping, because sometimes they make mistakes or they just look at the box score and they're like, oh, they're going on a bye. Then they play Denver. I don't want that. But you're again looking at Rodriguez, who should get the volume. Even though it's Denver, you should expect what? He rushed 15 times, like I said, in week 11. So we should expect that and more going forward.
Again, I know every leagues are different. Sometimes it's just waiver city all across the weekend. But I know last week, for example, I was able to kind of handcuff one of my Genti teams with Mostert just because I already had someone get ruled out for the season ahead of Monday night. So work a little bit smarter, not harder sometimes when you can. But hey, I mentioned that cock group for Chris Rodriguez. And yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs was one of those guys, obviously coming off of the single best fantasy performance of the year. That was pretty cool for anyone who drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. And accordingly, guys, want to show you this Jahmyr Gibbs signed rookie card presented by the fine folks at Pristine Auction. You can actually find this and so much more cool memorabilia on their site. We have a very special code for you if you are trying to bid on some Jahmyr Gibbs goodness or anyone else. They really do have a huge depository over there. But yes, guys, over at Pristine Auction, if you're already registered with them, use code FANTASYLIFE when you win an item to receive $25 off at checkout. And if you're a first-time user, you can register using code FL20 to get $20 off and credits added to your account. Maybe you're a first-time user and you buy a first-time item. Again, that's code FL20 for $20 off, and then code FANTASYLIFE for 25 more, only at Pristine Auction. Before we get to some more waiver wire goodness, I want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Huel, who produce no prep, fast, nutritious, plant-based meals that don't compromise your health. Huel actually has 2 meal replacement products in particular that have really been helping me avoid skipping meals or feeling bad about eating something quick and crappy during the day. Their ready-to-drink options include all sorts of tasty flavors. I have been drinking this iced coffee one because I really can't stop drinking coffee throughout the course of any day. That's probably why I talk so freaking fast all the time. But I digress. I'll worry about that problem later. Anyway, it's just a good issue to, be able to continue drinking coffee. And I've also been pleasantly surprised at how full I've stayed for hours after drinking it. These actually include 35 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, 27, not 26, 27 essential vitamins and minerals, no added sugar, also gluten-free, and hey, under $5 per meal and ready to go in this economy, no less. Guys, we also have a daily greens drink for which someone who despises the existence of vegetables like myself is pretty much a game changer, okay? So I've tried doing the green powder stuff over the years, and it's not terrible or anything, but I will say this stuff is objectively tastier, and it's just good to be able to stay healthy and be quick about it. So these are actually developed by registered nutritionists and dietitians. They contain 42 vitamins, minerals, and superfoods, only 25 calories, trying to keep those LBs off during the holiday season, 4 grams of fiber, and just 1 singular gram of sugar. You can go ahead and brag to your doctor about that at the yearly checkup. So yeah, guys, Huel makes healthy eating simple, and they also just launched in the Target stores nationwide. Try both products. They have 50% off your purchase for new customers with my exclusive code FANTASYLIFE at www.huel.com/fantasylife. And again, you can use that code and fill out the post-checkout survey to help support the show. Again, that's www.huel.com/fantasylife with code FANTASYLIFE. Waiver Wire Monday here on the Fantasy Life Show. Kendall, we went over some of the big fish in the pond that we're trying to get, but as always, we are trying to just make sure that roster from top to bottom is as stacked with upside as possible. So accordingly, got some handcuffed running backs that you guys really should be on the lookout for. So again, the Kyle Monangai and the Kenneth Gainwells of the world are fantastic, but let's face it, they're rostered in far more leagues than not. What about Dylan Sampson, though, Kendall? Someone who had a fantastic game for the Browns, getting used in the pass game, making good use of the touches. And while he didn't end up missing much, if any time, like Quinshon Judkins was getting pretty banged up out there. So, Dylan Sampson, I don't know if he'd be ranked, as a top 12 running back or anything the second Judkins misses time, but he would all of a sudden go from, let's face it, a complete nobody to someone that would be in that top 30 conversation at a minimum.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the rest of their schedule, San Francisco, Tennessee, then they start the fantasy football championships at Chicago against Buffalo, finishing things off week 17 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So he got you, and I don't know how many people played him, 16.2 fantasy points, but like you said, I was nervous. I'm a Quinshon Judkins manager in only one league, but I was nervous seeing him go into the blue medical tank, come back, go back in, come back out. So it was just like the snip snap situation with what was that, Michael Scott in The Office, like snip snap. It was just going back and forth. So I don't know. In the fourth quarter, you saw a little bit of things change. Sampson took 7 of 11 snaps. Judkins played 5. Jerome Ford, who I've been asked about here today, just played 1. So if you're asking me between Dylan Sampson, Jerome Ford, you're going Sampson every single day. He's available in 99% of leagues. So I think he's a solid waiver wire target the rest of the way too. Like at this point, Ian, when we talk about some of these backup running backs, like we've talked about with Blake Corum, Tyler Algier, other guys, you just say, okay, they're going to get a bigger workload if the guys in front of them really do go down with an injury. We never want it, but you just want to be ahead of the game so you won't have to spend as much money. So yeah, I think Dylan Sampson, if you have the availability, if you have the depth on your bench, he's definitely someone to go and look at.
Another guy you definitely want to keep in mind for, especially if you are rostering Ashton Genty right now, is Raheem Mostert. Now, again, as we kind of mentioned at the top of the show, it's not a situation where I'm going to be crossing out Genty's name and just slotting in Raheem Mostert and expecting RB2 goodness or anything like that. Again, Zamir White has been a healthy scratch, and they have like Dylan Labe, involved on pass downs as well. Obviously, an offense we don't feel great about, but again, Mostert has been the clear-cut guy behind Ashton Genty, and when you are getting 15 plus touches per game, guys, there is a good opportunity. I should say at least more opportunity to rack up fantasy points than most out there. So, Kendall, in my, again, early week 13 ranks, I have Genty as my RB20. Again, it's a tough matchup against the Chargers, and just with no teams on bye, it's a little bit easier to find guys to potentially move ahead of an archetype like that. So, again, I would not be having Raheem Mostert as a top 24 running back, but once I start getting into, Kamani Vidal, RB29, Kenneth Gainwell, and Trey Benson, I think that's probably about where he fits. And let's face it, once we start getting to the flex rankings, that's going to be ahead of a lot of the wide receiver 4s and wide receiver 5s who we don't feel good about starting during the course of any given week.
Yeah, and like you said, Mostert has primarily been a receiving back over the past 2 seasons as well, so you expect him to kind of take over that role. I'm curious with you, Ian, do you think that there's any push and pull with Chip Kelly being gone now? Because I know that they've had some history together. I think it was the Eagles and the 49ers between the two of them. Do you think that pushes him down the depth chart at all, where they look at Zamir White and say, we want to give Zamir White something else? I just look at the offensive coordinators. It's weird. This team is bad. We can just say that. We don't even have to dive into the stats of how bad they are, but that's the only thing I'm looking at here with Mostert as well, is that he's had ties with Kelly before, so maybe they go away from him, but I would still have him above, like you said, Zamir White, who has just not even been available for the team, or even Dylan Labe.
No, it's a very good point. And honestly, when you do look at Greg Olsen, the time he's kind of been with the Raiders, maybe he has a better relationship with Zamir White than, Chip Kelly was. So again, this is definitely, okay, I'm okay trying to pick this dude up and everything. Definitely not going hard into fab streets or anything like that. And I would be cautious, with what we're expecting here in week 1. But just based on what we have seen throughout this season, again, I do think Raheem Mostert is, worthy of being the next man up behind Genty, at least in terms of what we know right now. So again, available in 99% of leagues. So not going to cost you much and should be available on that waiver wire. Also, Kendall, this will be one, honestly, that I probably would prefer to have just for a stash at this point. Because again, we heard Genty's ankle injury isn't severe. So talk about Malik Davis, someone available also in 99% of leagues. I know we all wanted Jaden Blue to become a thing, but he's been a healthy scratch ever since he had that fumble against the Denver Broncos so many weeks ago. So again, Javonte Williams crushing it, but God forbid he wins the lottery, decides to take December off. I do think Malik Davis will be the next guy up in Dallas.
Yeah, he actually was someone I was in such a bad place last weekend that I had to go and pick up. And I just said to myself, it was in one of those, FFWC leagues. And I just said to myself, maybe there's a chance here. Because those waiver wires are just so disgusting that I just have to try and tell myself and talk myself up and say, this is going to be fine. Malik Davis you're just going to be a couple weeks early. And that's what you would be if you picked him up, right? He's 99% available for a reason, because no one's looking his way. But he was signed off the team's practice squad. I think we've seen him in 4 games for the Cowboys this season, and including the last 3 games. So he's got 7 carries, 26 yards on the year. Nothing to write home about or anything else. But again, we're being overly cautious, and we're saying to ourselves, if one of these guys went down, we are just early. And then you look really smart, like you said, Ian, at the Thanksgiving dinner table when, we never want injuries, but if it were to happen, they'd say, wow, Ian was 2 weeks ahead on this guy. Yeah, you want that.
They like Hunter Lupke too. They're kind of fullback, and they got Phil Maffa, who's been out for a while. I want Phil Maffa to become a thing just because I made a meme with the everybody loves Phil or Phil needs to eat, whatever that show is. It's actually pretty good on Netflix, but would like that to happen. But all meme stuff aside, Malik Davis, yes, next man up in Dallas. So again, those are 3 more so, as Kendall said, FFPC, any of these sort of, RT sports leagues where the waiver wire pickings are slim. Those are the sort of guys you should be looking at. If you do have a league where maybe things aren't so slim, I did want to list some other running backs that, again, again, are good quality handcuffs, and we would prefer over all those three guys we just listed. They are Bashal Tuten, a handcuff who I know made a lot of people mad over the last 2 weeks, expecting him to become more than that. And again, nothing against Bashal Tuten, but he still is a great handcuff. One injury to Travis Etienne away from skyrocketing up to fantasy ranks, still available in 52% of fantasy leagues. Also, Tyler Algier, Tajay Spears, Brian Robinson, Tank Bigsby, Blake Corum, Ollie Gordon, and Keaton Mitchell in terms of various availability. So, Kendall, I would say out of those guys, if I have two spots on my bench and just all of them are available, I would lean towards, I think, Blake Corum and Brian Robinson. Tuten's right there. And if you want to say Tuten, I get it. Tyler Algier without the Penix injury would also be in that. That's the big four: Tuten, Algier, Corum, and Robinson. If I had to pick two, I'd probably go with Corum and Robinson, just using their offenses as a tiebreaker. How about you?
Yeah, because, and Dwayne wrote this up, that Brian Robinson Jr. has been used just a little bit more these past couple weeks as well. Of course, they've got a game tonight, so we'll make sure and hope that we have no injuries, because I can't believe, Ian, at going into week 13 that we have CMC fully healthy. It just blows my mind. Shout out to whatever he did in this offseason, because it obviously worked. And then you brought up Blake Corum, and I think it's interesting because reading your article last week, which everyone can go and find at fantasylife.com with your early rankings and stuff, but Blake Corum, like, it's Kyren Williams' world right now, and we're just living in it. But you mentioned, like, if he were to go down, you would almost rank Blake Corum ahead of where you would have Kyren Williams week in and week out, because we just haven't seen anything from Jarquez Hunter. Like, he's just not been involved. So he would get that bigger workload. He would get the Kyren Williams workload and maybe a little bit more. So yeah, Blake Corum's way up there. And like you said, Tyler Algier is still in flex territory if someone does have him. Like, you might have been playing him already.
And again, it's a situation where if Bijan went down, we would expect Tyler Algier to really get the lion's share of all touches in that backfield. And hey, Kirk Cousins did look a little bit better last week. So maybe I'm underestimating the Falcons' offensive upside the rest of the way. So with those other guys, again, a little bit more availability. So maybe they are who you're forced to kind of land on anyway. But Tajay Spears not giving us much in that Titans offense. Who is? Maybe Chimere Dike, more on him shortly. But again, just a situation where he's an explosive, pass-catching, friendly back. Could do worse, God forbid something happens to Tony Pollard. And also looking at Tank Bigsby, one injury away from Saquon from likely being the lead early down running back, y'all, in Philly. And then with Ollie Gordon and Keaton Mitchell, again, two more guys available in north of 90% of leagues who are one injury away from at least being in that lower end RB2 discussion. So good stuff on the running backs. But now let's turn our attention to some waiver wire wide receivers. Want to focus on three rookies to start, because as we all know, sometimes it does take a while for these guys to break out. But once they do, you'll really wish that you had them on your roster in the first place. I even go back to Amon-Ra St. Brown's rookie season. I believe that just tantalizing stretch he had only started to begin really in week 13. So not saying there's necessarily another sun god waiting out here, but Kendall, if there was, I'm tempted to put a chip on none other than Chimere Dike. Had another 2-touchdown performance yesterday, one receiving and then also one as a punt returner, of which he is of the electric variety. So yes, it is the Titans, but also yes, who else are you going to throw the ball to? Calvin Ridley broke his leg. Alec Aromanor isn't practicing with a hamstring injury. And man, even if and when those guys are getting back, like, DK has had the slot role on lock ever since Tyler Lockett left the picture. And with Cam Ward, no, I'm not saying he's the second coming of, just Peyton Manning or anything like that, but I've seen enough to believe he is a good quarterback in an awful situation. So yeah, I think Cam Ward is capable of getting one singular pass catcher in Tennessee, potentially to some consistent fantasy production.
Yeah, well, I mean, we want to say nice things about this, Chimere Dike and just the Tennessee Titans, because we haven't been able to say it all season, Ian. So why not say it now going into week 13? I do think he's a viable option, because you look at him, he scored, like you said, 21.4 fantasy points on Sunday. Yes, that was aided by, the electric punt return touchdown that you said. But I think he has legs in this offense, because like you said, where else are they going to throw the ball? You look at the rest of season schedule for the Tennessee Titans. They play the Jacksonville Jaguars this weekend. Then they play the Browns, the 49ers. They've got the Chiefs. That's week 16. Week 17, they finish things up against the Saints. So I think, again, if you need a little bit more help in the wide receiver department, it's a lot harder to predict and project what these guys are going to look like, right? That's why I always say, Ian, I've got more running backs on my bench than I do wide receivers at this time of the year, because you know that they're one injury away from stepping up and getting that big volume workload. For the wide receivers, it's a lot harder to predict and say, okay, well, we hope that, this guy can come up and this guy, but you just never know. So with Chimere Dike, I do think that he's worth it. I mean, he's reached 16 fantasy points in 3 of 5 games. So that's also something worth noting. So again, if you're thin at the wide receiver room, he might be one that you look at to pick up, and you cut someone that hasn't been giving you that volume in fantasy points over the last couple of weeks.
I'm with you, Kendall, but unfortunately, I'm in some of these leagues. There's positional limits. I go to cut a wide receiver for a running back, and it's like, no, you have too
I
many running
know.
backs. You got to cut
I
another one.
know.
I don't know who started that, but shame on you. Nothing, not even kickers, makes me more upset in fantasy football than positional limits on specific spots. So, hey, this week, guys, with Chimere Dike, again, assuming Aaron Manor's out, but even if he returns, I'm not going to be exactly nosediving this dude down the ranks. He's coming in as my wide receiver 41. That is ahead of guys like Tez Johnson, Keenan Allen, Trey Tucker, Xavier Worthy, Luther Burden, and Josh Downs, among others. I still would start our one true short king, Greg Dortch, DJ Moore, Ricky Pearsall, Keisha Booty ahead of him. But man, we're talking about another good game, guys, from being in that low end wide receiver 3 conversation. That's the sort of stuff he's doing as the clear cut number 1 in Tennessee. Also wanted to talk about Jaden Higgins, the Houston Texans, one of, I should say, their Iowa State rookie wide receivers. But unlike Jalen Noel, it has been Higgins actually ascending up into the starting lineup. So only one football to go around, obviously, Kendall, and this is the Nico Collins show more weeks than not here. But Higgins has been making the most out of his opportunities recently. And even if we don't get CJ Stroud back, we've seen Davis Mills and his long freaking neck actually prove capable of getting this passing game going a little bit. So Jaden Higgins, someone's still available in 78% of leagues right now.
Yeah, I love Jaden Higgins. Like he's been one that I'm just tied to him now, Ian, where I just can't, even if I have to make roster cuts, I look at him and I say, no, this is going to work out by the end of the year, right? It has to at this point. But yeah, that Thursday game where that was crazy that the Texans were able to pull that out, but 4 passes for 38 yards and a touchdown. More importantly, though, he was targeted a season high 9 times. And so I know people have pushed back for me, Ian, saying that when CJ Stroud comes back, like this is going to go back down and he's just not going to get the volume or the love. But I want to push on that maybe Jaden Higgins is just really gaining the trust of just the offensive coordinators, just the organization as a whole, because his playing time has been on the rise. And that's what we've seen over the past couple of games. I think if the play time continues to improve and he becomes a bigger part of this offense, like he would be that wide receiver 2 for them. And that's what we've been seeing here. So again, the Texans have a chance to make a push too for the playoffs. Like they have not played the Colts yet. And that's going to be one of the big things for the playoff push. They have to play the Colts twice, and then they also have to play Jacksonville, I think, one more time here. So when I look at that, Ian, I just say to myself, they're going to make this push. Even if CJ Stroud does come back, I think that he is still going to be looking Higgins' way. So I love Jaden Higgins to pick up and just roster the rest of the way.
Another scoring environment isn't great, but honestly, I do think that in the run game, like, could honestly compel the Texans once CJ Stroud is back to actually start throwing the football around a little bit more. Because again, just from having watched these, I would say their biggest strength on that offense probably is their wide receiver room. So why not feature it just a little bit more than they have been? Last rookie wide receiver we wanted to break down is going to be Bears rookie wide receiver 3, Luther Burden. Obviously displaced eliminated Zacchaeus last week, and that did continue into week 12. So good news there. It's a crowded offense. You know, we're not necessarily expecting Burden to lap Roma Dunze or Mr. 2 touchdown DJ Moore. And we also got Colson Wellman involved. So I'm just high on the player here, Kendall. Okay. It's a situation where, yeah, Burden's only coming in as a wide receiver 4. But if we did have to be in a situation where it's like, all right, we got a bunch of guys only probably going to see between 4 or 6 targets, like I do trust the electric, fast rookie playing with Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson more than a lot of other guys that maybe, you know, are forced to deal with only a handful of targets during any given week.
Yeah, I've been hanging on to Luther Burden as well, because I think that you see DJ Moore have a good week. You see, Roma Dunze is always going to be there. Burden, they've all gained between 46, 64 receiving yards this week. So I look at it and I know it's tough to decipher like which wide receiver is going to continue earning more playing time. I think it is going to be Burden. And it's going to be hard to kind of predict which guy you want to play week in and week out. But that's just the beauty of fantasy football, Ian, because if it would be easy, then everyone else would do it. So I just say, hang on to him. He's also someone that I've had a really hard time cutting ties with, because I just want to believe that he's going to earn more. And like we've said before, if one of these guys were to go down with an injury, just like we talk about the running backs, like if it were to be Roma Dunze, DJ Moore, he would step into a little bit more going forward. So I think he has a shot to end the season in a really good way. I don't think it's going to be, mind blowing where we say he's our league winner, especially in the fantasy playoffs, but someone that could get you consistent fantasy points. That's just what we want to see.
And again, those are the 3 rookie wide receivers we are keeping an eye on: Chimere Dike, Jaden Higgins, and Luther Burden. Do you think it'd be in that order of your preference, Kendall? I'm a little bit swayed towards Burden. I think DK right now, he has the role we're looking for. So DK is definitely one for me. I think I prefer Burden over Higgins, just more so as a tiebreaker, being I have more confidence, I think, in the Bears offense at this point. Their schedule gets really tough. I admit that. But I would go DK, a little bit of a teardrop, and then Burden just ahead of Higgins.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, even though I love Jaden Higgins and I want to say more nice things about him, but I am curious to see what he's going to look like with CJ Stroud coming back. He's expected to return week 13. Luther Bird and the Bears just continue to win too, by the way. Like this is a totally different Bears team than we've been seeing in years past. So yeah, I think I would put Luther Burden just slightly ahead of Higgins.
I mentioned that schedule, and you just got to beat the person in front of you. Okay. I'm not trying to penalize the Bears for doing just that and looking good against bad competition. I'm not even going to bring up the bad competition. It's just about looking forward in Philly, in Green Bay, against the Browns, against the Packers, and then against the 49ers. I mean, guys, it's late November at this point, and we're talking about Philly, Green Bay, and then 2 games in Chicago. Even independent of those matchups, I mean, I would probably just go ahead and guess that at least one, if not 2, are going to have, those high sort of wins or precipitation that we just are not really big fans of when trying to optimize fantasy points. So with all that in mind, I did want to shout out just a couple more wide receivers if you are in the business of trying to get a few more points here in this week. Now we would start off with someone who hopefully is back this week, but Jaden Reed, guys, still available in 64% of leagues. He did have his practice window open, and yes, it might take a week or so to get him ramped up and ready to play, but we're talking about a guy where through the first 8 weeks or so of last season was a legit wide receiver one. You can't say that about too many wide receivers who are, again, readily on more waiver wires than not. Also, keep an eye on Andre Yoshivas, someone that Kendall wrote up in her waiver wire article that you can find at fantasylife.com. And Kendall, this is more of a 1 week stopgate, but hey, if you are a T. Higgins fantasy manager out there, again, he already has been ruled out for Thursday. And with Joe Burrow coming back, who's to say Yoshi can't give us a wide receiver 3-esque week here in this spot, Kendall?
Yeah, right. I mean, and we've seen it. We saw it last year. Andre Osivas and Joe Burrow have a connection. So it's not like it's going to be random or anything else like that. Like you said at the beginning of the show, we get Joe Burrow back. So I think Andre Osivas is someone that you should have maybe looked at last week. If he's still floating around out there and you are Higgins injury. Yeah, I do think that even though Jamar Chase is going to come back, you still have targets up for grabs. And so I know that we could talk about the tight ends and maybe them getting a little bit more when we look at it. I know Mitchell Tinsley is also someone that other people have written up. But Andre Osivas should be, just a little bit more rostered, especially if, like you said, you're looking for a streamer this weekend, which again, that's more for injuries since we have no teams on a bye. He would be a good one to look at.
Anyone on my 32 team league looking for Mitchell Tinsley? Stop looking because I already got him rostered.
Wrong.
Yeah, let's freaking go. Last 2, A.D. Mitchell and John Mechie, the new number 1 and number 2 wide receivers for your New York Jets. Of course, Garrett Wilson could be back, but I don't know. It's a lost season at this point. Who's to say that he might not just take the rest of the season off? So A.D. Mitchell does basically everything fantastic except, catch the football, which is kind of a big part of playing wide receiver. But we do see generally some really good wide receivers leading the league in drops. Right now, guys, it's a 3-way tie atop the drop leaderboard, okay? Jerry Jeudy has 8. I know what you're going to say. Oh, he sucks at football. That makes sense. Sure, I'll even agree with you for the purposes of this. The other 2 guys tied at the top, though, CeeDee Lamb and Devontae Adams, all right? So a lot of times getting drops is honestly more so a factor of being open enough to drop the ball in the first place. They tend to regress, and A.D. Mitchell tends to get open better than a lot. So just my wide receiver 52 on the week, but he is next to guys like Aiden Higgins, Jerry Jeudy himself, Jordan Addison, amongst others. And then also with John Mechie, again, scored the touchdown. And just, Kendall, I think this is an opportunity for this Jets passing game to go from being like, the worst we've ever seen. I can't even say respectfully like to Justin Fields because that's not respectful, let's face it. But we didn't know if we were going to get 50 or 60 passing yards out there. I'm not saying Tyrod is going to be, pushing for 300, but I think we can more safely say we'll be looking at 170, 180. And when they're mostly just going to 2 wide receivers, that's going to be hard to rank them too far down the range.
Isn't that sad that we're excited about that? Sorry, Justin Fields, but it just didn't work. We love you for fantasy football though, and that's all we can say. Yeah, I also don't think Garrett Wilson's going to be back anytime soon. Like you said, this is kind of one of those lost seasons, so it leaves the Jets with John Mechie, it leaves the Jets with A.D. Mitchell. So yeah, if A.D. Mitchell can catch the ball, I would say nicer things about him. I will say, like, when you look at the stats too, like he really is far above Mechie when we look at route rate at 75%, target share 26%, air yard share, especially at 62%, like you've talked about before, Ian. So I think both of them are fine. A.D. Mitchell really is the one that I'm looking at where I say if I'm really desperate going into the week and needs a little bit of help, that I would look there because I just don't know if we see Garrett Wilson again.
I can't believe I'm doing this again with another wide receiver who I know is bad. But I think it's going to work, Kendall. I think he's going to be good. It was funny when I've been in this business, I don't know, 10 years, over 10 years, I think full time now. And after I was doing it for a year or two, like one of my buddies was like, hey man, I was listening to some of your stuff. Like, do they make you kind of pick bad random players to like actually support and get behind. And I was like, nah, that's actually just me, man. But they are good. And I started trying to talk about that. So all that said, I believe in AD Mitchell. It's up to you to decide if you guys need to as well. But with all that said, Kendall, let's close things out here with our Week 12 Sheesh Report. Two categories to break down here that will hopefully make you a little bit more aware of what went down on Sunday. If you didn't get a chance to watch every game and comb through the box scores, we got your back. So first up, we want to talk about players who were so close to scoring. In fact, they got all the way down the 1 yard line. Unfortunately, did not get those extra 3 feet and actually score the touchdown. So leading things off, we actually have Travion Henderson, who got tackled at the 1 yard line twice and did not score on 2 separate drives. So again, I know we didn't get the fantasy points, but the usage still looked good. Very, very close to having yet another big game. Also note Ramondre Stevenson got stopped twice on the same drive. Perhaps that will help them actually give Travion some of those more fantasy-friendly touches in the future. Otherwise, we had Javonte Williams, David Montgomery, Kenneth Gainwell, Terrell Jennings, Devontae Smith, Dontavian Wicks, Xavier Restrepo all also get stopped just short of the goal line. We also saw Cowboys tight end Jake Ferguson. This happened to him twice in the same game. Hunter Henry, Colby Parkinson, Tyler Shuck actually had this happen 3 times across 2 different drives. Also Drake May and Dak Prescott. So Kendall, you might notice I named a lot of Patriots players there, and that was largely because there was one drive where they had 8 plays basically between the 1 and the 10 yard line where they just kept getting stopped just short. So it's unfortunate. I don't think losing 2 of their starting linemen is necessarily going to help. But my biggest takeaway here is just that Travion Henderson, as much as Ramondre, returned, and we had Terrell Jennings getting one of those goal line carries, we're still talking about someone who I believe had 22 combined carries and targets. If that sticks, he's very much going to remain an RB1 the rest of the way.
Oh, yeah. You were happy with it because that was the biggest question, Ian, coming into the week. Okay, Ramondre Stevenson, is he going to – because this team and organization loves Ramondre Stevenson. So it was a very valid question and concern, like when he comes back, what's he going to look like? But he did nothing for you if you had to start him. And I know I had to start him one place because, again, Ian, we're going into week 13. And so some of our running backs stink and we're desperate. So he scored 2 fantasy points. So you just hope that this sticks week in and week out now because Travion Henderson, it feels like maybe we've passed the torch. And now it's going to be Travion Henderson's team and Ramondre Stevenson will still be there. But yeah, he had 6 carries for 5 yards, 1 reception for 5 yards as well off 2 targets. So sorry, Ramondre Stevenson fans, we might have seen the torch passed along. And if we have, then Travion Henderson, it took this long, Ian, but now we can finally be a little bit happy about it.
And look, sometimes we see the short yardage guys have the lower yards per carry because they're in situations where they're not really trying to rip off big runs. They're just trying to get a couple yards, hopefully move the sticks, score a touchdown, whatever it be. But the fact that does seem like it's Mondre's role, at least for 1 week, could mean that, again, that starter, that mostly 3-down workload will continue to go, hopefully, to Mr. Travion Henderson. Last category for you guys before we head on out, unrealized air yards. So, again, we're trying to quantify the total distance that happened on a player's incomplete targets because this at least tells us that, no, while the box score wasn't great, we actually have guys that are getting fantasy-friendly downfield opportunities. So overall, 8 players had at least 75 unrealized air yards last week, led off by Trey Tucker with 171, AD Mitchell at 153, Chris Olave was also over 100, Devontae Smith, CeeDee Lamb, Rome Odunze, Jaden Higgins, and Emeka Ibuka, also all over 75. So it really was a Trey Tucker one that stood out, though, Kendall. I tweeted out some of the misses here a little bit before the show, but man, first play of the game had a good 30 or 40 yards overthrown, and then 3 times on the same freaking drive, this dude got open enough to, again, earn a target in the first place, but Geno underthrew him on 1, overthrew him on 2 other, left us all saying sheesh as we were watching that. So Trey Tucker, I remember a lot of people kind of laughed when Geno Smith basically compared him to Santana Moss back in August, but he had the huge 3-touchdown game earlier in the season. And again, it's not like that all these air yards came on different drives. I'm not saying Trey Tucker should have had 4 touchdowns out there, but another simulation, man, he would have added 100 yards and a score. I maintain Trey Tucker, good football player.
Trey Tucker, just give us the Trey Tucker from week 3 against Washington. What was that, the 40-point day? And we'll take that every single week. Like he's not doing enough right now. And maybe Geno Smith gets, I can't even say it, Ian. Like we know Geno Smith. We know who he is this season. It's not the guy that you and I always defend. It's not an easy schedule for Denver week 14, week 15 against Philly, week 16 against Houston. They finished with the Giants week 17. So maybe there's a little hope there. But it's just not an easy schedule the rest of the way. I'm with you though. Good football player, just doesn't show up in any scores or stats that we have from him. It's fine.
Good football player. We just have no way of quantifying
you
that.
Just other have no
than
way
unrealized
to say
air
it.
yards. So we appreciate the service from Unrealized Errors. We appreciate you for checking out the Fantasy Life Show. If you like the show, then please like the show. Always helps when you hit that little subscribe button as well. So for Kendall, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, take care, everybody.